Hey Gearheads, and welcome to Garage Talk, a discussion about all things automotive. I'm Cory.
And I'm Matt, and each week this podcast will serve as a catalyst for discussion on all sorts of topics that grind our gears, rev our engines, or just need a bit more conversation.
And a bit more conversation we had. We had our first ever repeat guest.
That's right.
So
back again. He didn't get enough abuse the first time around. He had to come back for some more.
Yeah, he had to come back for some more. So a few weeks ago, we had Bryant Blakemore for back-to-back episodes.
Yeah.
One continuous conversation that was just too good to cut him off. And a few weeks further back still, week 40, or episode 44, Vehicles Need Nannies 2.
Yeah.
Bill Taylor is back with us this evening, today, whenever you're listening to this episode, in response to last week's episode.
Yeah.
So, past couple weeks, we've kind of been talking about the auto industry, certain brands making big moves, FCA becoming Stellantis with their merger buyout, complicated business talk with PSA. And then we followed it up last week with General Motors and the direction.
All the wrong that they're doing.
Some right, Matt.
I hadn't found it yet.
We don't know all of it yet. There's that really dark picture with all the cars in the background. Anyway, check out last week's episode. In the thumbnail, you can see the quote-unquote exciting future of General Motors. It's all electric. Yeah.
Even your thumbnail was a better picture than what I was finding online.
Yeah. So I do what I can. Anyway, so this week, who better to talk about the demise of beloved brands that made the likes of John DeLorean famous than the custodian of discarded brands himself.
Yes.
The one, the only, Bill Taylor, the final employee of the Saturn brand, the guy who turned out the lights.
Yep.
So we've referenced it. This is his second time with us. If you have not heard our introduction and first conversation with Bill, go back right now, listen to episode 44, and then come back here.
Yeah.
Because he's a blast and a wealth of information, and we'll just welcome him on right now.
I wonder though if you're the person that turns the lights off, do you leave your keys on your desk, or do you have to have the keys to lock up?
Well, Bill, long time no chat. I believe it's been, a month?
Thereabout, yeah.
A whole month.
So we promised we were going to have you back, and here we are. So if you have not yet listened to Bill's episode, it is the episode titled Vehicles Have Nannies Too. What is it, episode 44? I probably should have pulled that up before. Hey, let's see here.
You got it?
I am...
We'll edit this flat spot out right here.
Yeah. Yep, 44. I had it
Good
right.
guess.
So if you have not yet listened to Bill's interview as we got to know Bill, go back and listen to episode 44, Vehicles Have Nannies Too. Wealth of information. We are just going to tap a little bit further into his knowledge and his history in regards to last week's episode.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
Bill, you reached out to us after we started poking and jabbing a little bit at GM and
at
decided
me.
that
At me too.
well,
Yeah.
in particular at you, yeah. No, we're super excited to have you back on. Super excited
Thanks.
to discuss General Motors and all of their shortcomings as of late. And
hey,
Let me check my pension, make sure that it's protected.
oh, okay, all right.
make sure it's posted for the month, right?
That's right.
So
Yes.
I guess we'll just kind of open the floor up to you before we start digging for some specific questions that we have in follow-up to last week's episode. But what extra light can you shed on some of the things we shared last week in regards to, I guess it would be the death of some very beloved brands?
Yeah, it's probably a good place to start. It's, as you guys were talking about, I think you were really dwelling on Pontiac, the excitement division, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was what kind of caught my eye, caught my ear. And what a lot of people don't know is the decision making that went behind a lot of that. Because if you look at, as General Motors had to go through a bankruptcy, with the financial markets the way they were, and the inability to borrow money to finance a bankruptcy, they had to turn to the federal government. And that was not an easy task. And with it came a lot of strings, and rightfully so. And as General Motors was restructuring, there was an automotive task force that was put together by the government team, and they would come in and review the business, make recommendations. Actually, probably more than just a recommendation. They were making some pretty strong demands. And, General Motors had 8 brands at the time,
Wow.
and they said, you need to go down to just 2, Chevrolet and Cadillac.
Whoa.
And in hindsight, it may not have been a bad way to go. And I was with Saturn at the time, and there were a lot of mouths to feed.
Yeah.
And General Motors was not in a good financial position. So product development was very, thinned out. That's why you had a lot of badge engineering, which is a really bad term to use. But, Saturn was starved for product for the longest time. And then by 2006, 2007, we were flush with new product. Now it was, more General Motors product platforms than it was in the past, but some pretty good product. And, we were being pushed into becoming more of a premium brand, believe it or not, which I think our retailers like, because that usually commands a little bit more price. But those of us who were kind of the true believers really felt that we were kind of stepping away from what made Saturn.
Yeah, it was the secret sauce.
It was the secret sauce. But, as decisions were made, and like I said, big push to take it down to Chevy and Cadillac only. The CEO at the time was Fritz Henderson, and he said, look, he made a huge play to keep Buick, because Buick was really a big brand in China. I mean, a big seller in China. And when you do that, you couldn't just leave those dealerships that used to be Pontiac, Buick, and GMC as just a Buick store. So somehow the decision was made that there would be a Buick GMC channel, a Chevrolet channel, and a Cadillac channel. So that's how it got down, and that's how we were able to keep actually 4 brands instead of just 2.
Wow.
Now, it seems odd that the brands that were axed, Saturn, Hummer, Saab, and Pontiac, were probably the stronger brands from a consumer acceptance. If you were thinking about that portfolio, which had the most favorable, positioning, and those were it. But they also had the smallest dealer footprint.
Yep.
So it was cheaper to buy out those dealers. Saturn had 434 stores. Saab had 200, I think, maybe 180.
Wow.
Hummer had about the same, 200-ish. Now Pontiac was basically dueled with a GMC or a Buick store. So just to peel that out of there was almost nothing. But we paid those dealers and retailers a fee based on a factor that was put together. Some of them appreciated that. Some fought on that. And part of my job in winding down Saturn was helping those Saturn retailers transition out of the business and get their customers assigned to a GM store in the area that could provide really great service that the Saturn customers were used to.
Yeah.
Typically that was a Chevrolet store,
Right.
but the big challenge was making sure that those, if it's a Chevy store or a Buick store, they bought the Saturn parts. We got them trained on the Saturn product. The technicians went through all that, all that good stuff. It was not easy, but we pulled it off. And I'm proud to say we pulled it off from that standpoint. But now we are trying to stay connected to those customers and introduce them to GM brands as an alternative for their next vehicle. A lot of them weren't buying it.
Yeah.
They were like, I'm sorry, the only reason I bought a GM product was because it was Saturn or because it was Saab. So it was an interesting time.
Yeah.
Is that the reason why I see so many Chevy, what was it? Is it Captiva? It was basically the last generation Saturn Vue with a Chevy badge on it and nothing else changed. Was it to convert those customers over?
No, not necessarily that. That was more of because we had production capacity and, let's face it, we're not that, what was the term I wanted to use? We're not or humanitarians, I guess. We were, they're still trying to make a buck.
Right.
Sure.
And, trying to make sure that we maximized production where it was at, because that was where GM got into trouble along the way, was overbuilding product and then having to put huge incentives on it to keep the plants running, because that was the only way that they could make money. And it was just a vicious circle.
Yeah. Wow.
So you brought up a brand, and I don't want to steer too far off course here, but that we haven't really talked about much, and it's kind of been a shame, in Saab, because especially right there at the very end, I loved their design.
Oh, yeah.
I loved what they were doing. I loved the direction they were going on their original products. Now, they had a rebadged Trailblazer and things of that nature, but like the last generation Saab 9.5 sedan looked amazing.
They do have some nice ones. Yeah.
And then, we've already harped on the Pontiac Solstice Targa Coupe.
Right.
That I saw one in person at the Dallas Auto Show, DFW Auto Show, and would have driven it home that day. But to your point, you had to say goodbye to some brands that were actually doing some exciting, interesting things.
Yeah.
And to Matt's point, kind of focused on the boring, making a buck side of the business, unfortunately.
And the real sad thing about all this too is the Saturn retailers. I think I probably knew every one of them, because while there were 434 stores or facilities, there was only about 200 actual people, 200 retailers, because most retailers own multiple stores.
Right.
We gave them a geographic area, and it's like, if you can satisfy the needs for those customers with one store, great. If it takes 4 stores, it's going to take 4 stores.
Wow.
But because we gave them a market area, they were able to service it fully without having to worry about the crosstown competition.
Yeah.
They could do all those right things.
Right.
And that was the strength of that network, and that's how you ensured really great, the customer experience. I forgot where I was going with that, but it was a great story. They were good people, and they all found other businesses to go in those facilities. Unfortunately, there were things like a Nissan, Kia, Hyundai, Mitsubishi.
Yeah.
There were some brands.
That's another brand that could use a little TLC and some love right now.
No kidding. But because so many Saturn retailers picked those up, because look, this was 2010 when we finally did close those doors. They were desperate for something, and let's face it, the market was tough back then.
Oh, yeah.
It was really tough. And so they picked up these brands and probably elevated those brands, because you had a team of people that were Saturn trained. The facilities were right sized. They weren't overly big. They were just off the main street. If you ever noticed, they were never on the main drag typically, because they were looking for lower rent factors. So they were great facilities and great retailers to take over those franchises, and consequently, a lot of them did really well.
Yeah. I know our Saturn store here in town was actually, so we've got the Loop in Tyler, and it is just a long stretch of dealership after dealership. And our Saturn dealership was a new building from the ground up at the time, right in the middle of that stretch. And so I did think it was a little bit strange that they went new and they went where they did, because that was, the heart of automotive country. And they had one of the smaller ones, to your point, out of all of them. But it is now a VW store. And VW has moved all around Tyler over the past decade or so.
Yeah.
And so it's actually interesting what changes they made to turn it into a VW store, and it's been a few things in between. But every time I drive by there, I just remember, that used to be Saturn, and what could have been. So,
and the Saturn customers were fiercely loyal, which we love them for. And it's interesting timing that we're talking today, because I just saw an article on Haggerty.com.
You shared it today. I saw it too.
Yeah. So this 26-year-old girl, I think she's in New Jersey, huge Saturn fan, has been kind of trying to save Saturn. I think she's got like 17 Saturns, the original S series, in different varieties. and she's a big fan, doing everything she can to kind of keep them from the crusher, which I think is really cool. I reached out to her through Instagram, and we've had a little bit of a conversation tonight. What I'm hoping to do is a little bit deeper dive on where she truly got that love of Saturn, and maybe help close the loop for her, maybe get some closure for her so she can move on.
Yeah, I started reading the same article and checked her out on Instagram as well. So if people want to keep in touch with all that comes from that, they should go over to vehiclenanny.com and get some more follow-up information from you on your venture to find out more about Save Saturn, I believe is the hashtag that she went big on. So, and I believe I brought this up when we spoke last time, but there is a house in my neighborhood that I run by every time I go for a run that they've got they've got the first gen view in the driveway right next to I think it's second gen S-Class, oh my gosh, I said S-Class and Mercedes.
How could you?
So they've got two very early generation Saturns, and the fact that they still have them after all these years is one thing, but to have two in the driveway, they're obviously loyal. I just need to go over there, when the world goes back to quote unquote normal, and introduce myself and just, talk Saturn with them for a little bit.
There you go. Yeah. So interesting times. And, so that's the inner workings of some of the decision-making that took place. But what was really interesting is, as we're divesting the dealer network of all those, including Hummer, I had to go in and present to the vice presidents from time to time on our status of winding down the brand. So I'm waiting in the back of the room, and my counterpart, who was running the Hummer wind down at one point, was doing her bit. And then I think it was one of the manufacturing VPs said, "Why can't we just take all those Hummer vehicles and rebadge them as GMCs?" And of course, the attorney in the room was like, "No, we just shut down the brand. If we did that, we'd have a big problem with the former Hummer retailers."
Oh,
blah. But I guess the statute of limitations has run out since we now will be seeing a GMC Hummer.
Yeah.
So
it's very interesting the way that they pivoted on that one and how it's going to be a sub-brand. And I wonder how long that will last with the popularity of SUVs, because it could very well be its own standalone brand to go up against the Jeeps of the world. But then where does that leave GMC?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
so much opportunity there. So much opportunity there.
Was GM wasn't Hummer sold to a Chinese company?
Yeah. So that's a great segue into the next piece, because actually Saturn, Hummer, and Saab did find some ownership outside of General Motors.
Okay.
So yes, they were. The deal fell apart. It was so close to happening.
Gotcha.
And ironically, they were looking at doing electric Hummers back then.
Wow.
Saturn
way ahead of their time.
Saturn, I don't know if you knew this, but Roger Penske was buying Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to be moving over to Penske. Matter of fact, it was, supposed to be effective October 1st. September 30th, we all got our Blackberries, our laptops, our business cards even.
Yeah.
Wow.
And at 4 p.m., and I'm like racing because it just turned in my company car, and I was going to go buy a Saturn. I was heading to the Saturn retailer, and I got a call, said, "There's going to be a big conference call. You got to get on it. It's at 4:00. I'm like, "Well, I'm going to be in the car, but okay." So driving to the Saturn retailer, get on this conference call, and we hear that the deal fell apart because part of the condition was Penske had to find a new source of vehicles because GM didn't want to be building a Saturn vehicle anymore.
Yeah.
And he had lined up something through Renault. We were going to be bringing certain Renaults over, and it fell apart.
Wow.
And so I'm like, "Oh my God, I got to get off this call and call the Saturn retailer and cancel this sale."
No kidding.
Wow.
But so that's how close we got there. Saab, I thought, I need to go back. I thought another Swedish company bought them.
There were talks with Koenigsegg. Yeah. Spiker was talking with
Yes.
him.
Yeah.
And then
Something happened. There was an element of that. Maybe it was the parts network stayed alive for a while, but it just unfortunately none of them really got traction in an afterlife. So away they go.
and like I said earlier, those were the brands that were doing like
The fun
cool stuff.
Yeah.
And it was just.
And that's the other thing that I think Matt was talking about in your last episode, and that's the fact that what are these really cool vehicles? What are those things that really get your blood flowing? What's the ones that's like, oh my God, I gotta get that?
Yeah.
And C8 Corvette's a great vehicle, but
That's about
probably
it.
not. But who can? How many times can you buy a Corvette? And
Yeah.
And where are the Golfs of the world, of the GM world? Where are all the affordable fun cars?
Right.
And
I got on just this week, and just for giggles, we were searching for some for future episode ideas, and I built a Mustang, I built a Camaro, and I built a Challenger.
Okay.
And all of them V8 powered, all of them manual transmission, similarly optioned as far as what they had available to them, things like that. I did do the performance packages for each of them. So it was I think it was a 2LT 1LE SS that I built. It was $50,000.
Yeah.
Like that quick. It's $50,000. So
if you want a V8 Camaro, the LT1 is the way to go. Forget SS, and all that.
Okay.
LT1 is the way to go. It is the sleeper Camaro.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So
I don't think you can get. Go ahead.
I said, and you should know, Cory.
Yep.
I don't think you can get the 1LE on the LT1.
You can part it out. It's not a package, but you can part it out.
Okay.
So it can be done. There are loopholes. I know them, but
you don't get that cool black hood and the ducktail and
you could do your own cool things at that point and save a little bit of money.
Yeah, you could always black out the hood. You could buy vinyl wrap.
I mean, you're going to have to do it to the Subaru sooner or later. Bryant told you got to wrap that hood.
I know.
You'll have practice at that point.
Do we want to go down that rabbit hole now about the Subaru or what?
Oh.
Well, I've got a few more questions about GM. So you mentioned that it was basically an edict from the purse holders that said you're going to 2 brands, and by the wonders of negotiation, hallelujah, we were able to walk out with 4. I say we because fanboy over here, but we walked out with 4. And I'm sure it was not an easy decision figuring out, so you mentioned they kept Buick because of China sales.
Right.
GMC, I guess, was the yin to the yang of Buick of those 3, and that's why they kept them over Pontiac?
Yeah, because, at this point, Pontiac product was so close to Chevrolet. In the Chevrolet network was so big. I mean, the number, when I say network, I'm talking about the number of dealers.
Right.
And, the Chevy dealers for years have been crying foul about the other divisions having, nicer versions of their cars. And let's face it, we've seen that for a long time. And
that's essentially what all the other brands are nicer Chevys.
Yeah, and it's interesting because coming out of bankruptcy in 2009 and going into 2010, GM was really well positioned to be wildly successful, even if the car market stayed at a 10 million sales market each year, for U.S. sales, all brands. Keep in mind that historically the U.S. market's 16, it's been running 17 million in the last few years. So GM was really well structured to be able to survive a very low market sales if it ever came to that. Yeah. And unfortunately, the market came back really strong, and then the GM started hiring more and more people, and we kind of got back to the point where we were pre-bankruptcy.
Right.
Where just becoming too big again. Decision making was slowing down. Everybody wanted the same products. It just got, old habits die hard, I guess.
And so that Haggerty article that you mentioned earlier touched on some of the very same things about, Saturn was unique in that it didn't follow the formula, whereas all the other brands, it joked that to change the tile on the corporate bathroom would have to go through 5 layers of committees to even get that approved. And, in working the corporate world myself, I'm not in the automotive industry, but working in the corporate world myself, I see how that is exactly the case. I've been employed at the same place for 11 years now, and I've seen multiple, okay, we need a lean down, and then within 2 years, we're back up to the same size we were before. And I'm like, what was the point of all those painful cuts if we're just going to go right back to where we were? So that's a little sad to hear on the flip side, because look at what we as the enthusiasts lost in the process, only to see the company revert back to form. Because
I know
I still cannot wrap my head around the fact that the brand that made John DeLorean famous, basically, besides himself, because he had a atmosphere about him, a way about him himself, but the company that really made John DeLorean, for crying out loud, is no longer around. DeLorean's no longer around. Just so much sadness goes into that. And then to think, the iconic nameplates that I guess are lost forever, the GTO, the Firebird, the Trans Am, you go back and watch, I know I'm dating myself on this one, but, all the references on that 70s show to the Trans Am, I'm sure are on point to what it was like living back then. But it's just, it hurts. It hurts so bad to think about what was lost.
And you look at, and Matt, you did you built out these vehicles, the Camaros, Mustangs, and, you're looking at $50,000 for a vehicle that probably in our minds, it's like, it feels like a good $25,000 car.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of when I started out Vehicle Nanny a year or so ago, one element of it was helping people understand you can get affordable, fun vehicles. Now, they're going to be used, they're going to be a bit older, but, how do you pick the right ones? And is it really that hard to bring one kind of up to standard if you found a $8,000 whatever, right? Maybe it's a C10 pickup from 85 so it's interesting that we're all kind of on that same page. I was in a new car business for years, and I cannot get my head around spending more than $30,000 for a vehicle of any kind.
Yeah, that's Mm-hmm. If you
could, I'd rather be under 20, if I could help it.
Right.
What new car prices have done in the last decade alone just blows my mind. I keep going back to it, but my 07 Silverado that I bought, it was the first new vehicle I ever purchased. So it rings true and is constantly in the back of my head. It was a very well optioned full-size truck with a V8 engine for $37,000 on the sticker.
Yeah.
And you're talking work truck now.
Yeah.
And that wasn't that long ago. I know, boomer, I'm aging myself to the young crowd, but like an 07 for $37,000, and now you're talking a 2021, you're getting a work truck for the same price. That's ridiculous inflation right there.
Yep.
And I cannot fathom, to your point, I've built many Camaros, and I'm like, that's not Camaro money anymore.
Right.
I've had a Camaro recently, 45th anniversary SS, had every option on it that you could get. And I believe the sticker on it was $47,000. So that was a high performance V8 sports car.
Right. Top of the line.
For $47,000, maxed out. And you built basically mid-grade for $50,000.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's just...
And for another $15,000, 15 is still a chunk of change, but for $15,000 you can have a C8 Corvette.
Yep.
So what are they optioning themselves to the point of missing out on some opportunities? I know $15,000 is a jump, but
yeah.
So, going back to consolidating brands,
He's not going to let me
no,
off with that.
no, I'm not, because I'm curious as to what could have been.
Yeah.
And I know you didn't make make the choice, but what could have been in the full-size truck wars? Because for decades, you've had to add Chevy and GMC sales together, and they're like, okay, how does General Motors compare to Ford? And they are like right there. If you had one brand doing all the heavy lifting and you were funneling all those people to one brand. Now, I know there are some people out there that I'll never buy a Chevy, so they go and buy a GMC, which makes no sense to me, and vice versa. But if you had all of that on one brand and all that energy and marketing power and everything behind it, could Ford have been dethroned permanently? I know they're closing in, Matt. It could happen. If they had a decent interior right now, I think it would happen.
Yeah. Possibly.
When you say they, do you mean Ford or Chevy?
I think the General could dethrone Ford with a stepped up interior. The crew over at FCA, now Stellantis, figured it out a while ago that invest that $30 more per vehicle on the interior, and I don't even think it's that much, and really make where customers spend all their time a truly nice environment.
Yeah.
And the proof is in the pudding. It'll show in sales. And I think old Chrysler products that my family, both my parents, my grandparents have owned over the years, and just the night and day comparison. My mind goes back to the Intrepid. You remember the Intrepid?
Oh, the Intrepid. Yeah.
Made famous by the fact that it was the first vehicle to be completely designed on the computer. But then you go and sit in it, and it's like, what is this plastic nightmare? Just how far those brands have come just in interior fit and finish and truly being a place you want to spend a road trip.
Yep.
Yeah, without a doubt. And it's interesting. You probably heard the name Bob Lutz.
Once or twice.
Okay, so when he came back into General Motors, probably around 2000, 2001, kind of the product czar, that was his big thing was, look, let's improve the perceptual quality of our vehicles, because, he'd speak his mind, especially internal meetings. And he'd be like, these engineers come in there and they're bragging about door gaps being this or that. He goes, but when I go to open up the glove box, it feels like, excuse my French. And he, so he's like, these are the things the customers are touching. And well, you don't want to have a door gap like that. But let's maybe focus on the things that really matter, the things that are in front of them.
Right.
And for a number of years, I would say up until 2008, almost 2009, pre-bankruptcy GM, you were seeing some really nice changes to the interiors.
Yep.
And that was all on him.
In fact, that 07 Silverado that I had, they had two different dash designs depending on what grade. High praise across the board. Car and Driver, Motor Trend, all the big names, Road and Track.
Yeah.
I know they're practically all the same voice now, but all praised the interior of that truck. And that was like the deciding factor when I was like, all right, now's the time to pull the trigger. Like, they've finally gotten it together. And honestly, I would rather, material changes probably, but I would rather my 07 2LT interior in the brand new trucks than what is in current GM trucks, because it was classic.
Yeah.
To like the late 90s Silverado in that really wide landscape type design. It would look great with a huge screen in the middle. Like I've designed it in my head. It would look spectacular in the new trucks if they went back to that old design. And, they seem stuck on what they've had for the last two generations. They like that tower in the middle, and
Yeah. So to your earlier question about, what if they could have gone like to one corporate truck instead of Chevy and GMC? Clearly, that would have been the preferred way to go, because then you could put all your eggs in one basket. You don't have to try to make those little differentiations, and I mean little, like fenders, hoods, to differentiate the trucks, tailgates. You could really be more efficient. But let's face it, Chevrolet truck and GMC truck have such a rich history. I mean, we're not talking about screwing up and putting the Blazer name on a station wagon. We're talking about really digging deep into people's soul. Like you said, I'm a GMC guy. I'm never going to go buy a Chevrolet. And my thinking was, and I know the debate took place. I wasn't part of it, but I do know it took place. Do we go down to just a corporate truck, a GMC, let's say, and then a GM or a Chevrolet dealer that was strong in truck sales, he gets the GMC franchise. Those were things that were being considered, but just couldn't get over that hump. You talk about losing Buick. Nobody wanted to lose a truck brand. I think it would have helped General Motors. And I know that Ford, look, they're laser focused on keeping that F-150 cutting edge.
Oh, yeah.
And
bread and butter.
Bread and butter. And let's face it, they have hit the sweet spot with that truck every year. And you get, GM inches closer. Ram was, really on a roll. And as you know, that they kind of pushed Silverado out of the spot for a while there. But, it is really a challenge, and that is like the toughest segment to break into. Look at what Toyota has tried to do with, what do they call theirs, Tundra? I'm trying, and Nissan Titan. I always get those mixed up. Never really could break in, even though they're really great trucks. They just could not break in that, in that inner circle.
Yeah.
So
there's not, as far as the textiles and the comfortability of the interior, I would argue that Tundra has it figured out for sure. Like, the Toyota Tundra pickups, they're massive on the inside.
They're just massive.
Well, they are just massive, but everything is nice to touch on the inside of those trucks. Everything looks nice. Everything's Toyota. The fit and finish is there and all of that. But it's tough to. There's something to be said for that Chevy, GMC, F-150, Ram nameplate. I mean,
it's that rivalry that hopefully will never go away for the consumer, because look at when the Camaro did go away, look at what the Mustang did. As a not Mustang lover, I won't say I hate Mustangs, but as a not Mustang lover, outside of the Fox body, those were the least interesting Mustangs in my book, because competition breeds innovation, and to steal a line from many people, and it just wasn't there.
Yeah.
They kind of set their eyes on the Corvette and what could they do going up against the Corvette with some of their top line models, but for the everyday model, there was no competition. They were looking at the 370Z, which overlapped a little bit in the market, but so we never want to see strong competition go away. And for Mustang folks looking at what is possible with the Camaro coming up, it's like, do you really want your competition to go away? Do you want Ford to lose their edge and focus really on this electric SUV thing that they're calling a Mustang?
Yeah.
So
it's, I mean, there's do I want the challenge and the innovation to go away? No. But again, GM, and this is kind of how we ended up with the last episode. I really feel like GM is at a point where if they are financially stable enough, where's the fun? They have to involve some fun in this, and they've got to make it manageable. $50,000 for a new Camaro is not reasonable.
Yeah. And I don't want you guys to walk away from this thinking that I'm a GM hater or a basher. I'm fiercely loyal and really want them to succeed and want them to do the right things.
Yeah.
I get frustrated when it doesn't happen. I understand, I've seen how the inner thinking is on this, and it's a big organization still today. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Oh, yeah.
even though it got really better. And first of all, they're in a phenomenal cash position that we haven't seen before. Mary Barrow's doing a phenomenal job as CEO. A lot of respect for her. I mean, just really gets it and really wants all those right things. But they are, I mean, clearly you guys have talked about it. We know that they're going for a full electric future. Is that the gamble? I don't know. I mean, look, I'm
It's the
old
new
school when it
frontier.
comes to cars. It is the new frontier. And I think that, maybe we need to embrace it, especially if we can get great performance, long range, let's great vehicle dynamics with a strong range, quick charging, all those things that
Right.
overcome the objection of, hey, I can go 350 miles in my whatever car. I can gas up within 10 minutes and I'm on the road again
Right.
for 300 miles. If it takes you 2 hours to you even do a fast charge, are you taking that vehicle to Disney World? I don't think so. So lots to think about there.
Yeah.
The interview that really has me kind of worried was, I just caught a snippet of it. I believe it was shared from GM themselves, but it was centered around CES and all the announcements. And it was an interview with Mark Royce. I believe I'm pronouncing it right.
Yep, you are.
And he was asked point blank, is there a silver bullet to go up against Tesla? Is there something that they could come up with that would be the rally point to get behind and say, this is our vehicle? Prior to this interview, I was kind of thinking I almost said the H3, the Hummer, the electric Hummer would have been that rallying point to say, this is it, or one of the Cadillac flagship models.
Right.
And his answer was no. I was floored that he said there wasn't like a tent pole that they could say, this is the thing. And kind of has me a little worried because, the Bolt SUV thing, they're really pushing it. We've got the second gen coming up very soon. Will be announced probably by the time this episode actually goes live. We will know more details about it. But that wasn't it. That's going to be their volume play in the electric market. It's going to have Super Cruise and all that stuff on it. And then you've got the high end in the Cadillac models. But there was no, yes, it's going to be this. And I'm like, oh, okay. What? Had me kind of scratching my head.
Well, and I'm wondering if he was really thinking that through because, of the models that we saw through CES, there was a lot of promise as far as having those, the right packaging to go up against the Tesla models and things. But keep in mind, too, that to me, the silver bullet is having a large dealer network footprint across the U.S. that can service these vehicles.
Sure.
That, again, Tesla does not have. And,
no.
And is one of, and I've been touting it on many episodes, there are many weapons in the arsenal of the big established automakers that they can go to war against Tesla. And I think the way he was asked the question was really more around that excitement factor than it was anything else. And that leads me to believe that there isn't going to be any like crazy sports. There's no Mustang Mach-E GT in their lineup, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that's kind of sad because, one of the perks as a gearhead to this electrified future is ludicrous mode in the Tesla or watts to freedom in the Hummer. And if we're not injecting that little bit of just crazy, insane, what is that even doing here? How did that sneak out of corporate?
Yeah.
What are we doing? It's like,
well, that's kind of the General Motors edict, though, is to have a vehicle that, they wanted to not just compete, they want to be the leader in those segments. That's, especially under Mark Royce, when he took on the product role prior to becoming president of GM, he said, I don't ever want to hear any of my engineers say that we are going to be able to compete with Mustang. We're going to be able to compete with the F-150. He goes, we should be the class leaders. Mm-hmm. So I'm surprised that he would say that in the interview. I'm not saying he didn't, but typically Mark has an answer, and it would have been, yes, we've got it, and ours are going to be doing everything twice as good as Tesla. Normally that's his speak, so I'm not sure what he was thinking.
I'm going to have to go back and hunt that one down because I hope I dreamt it, but my jaw hit the floor when his answer was no. I was like,
you're pretty observant. Yeah.
That's not what I expected to hear from him.
No, and that would be unusual. But yeah, I think if they get that platform, which they've been touting, if they get that electric platform where it's, there's some consistency, there's interchangeability, let's say, of the battery packs or whatever they're using on that skateboard platform. Now you can start putting different bodies on this thing, and I'm oversimplifying it, obviously, but there's a lot you can do, and then all of a sudden the world opens up.
Right.
And I hope that is the case, and I hope with enough volume that they get the price down too, because we talk about price. I saw that in the last quarter last year, the average price of a GM vehicle was $40,000, and for the longest time it was hovering at $36,000, $37,000. Obviously, that's because model mix is skewed toward trucks and the big SUVs, but $40,000 as the average.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of that answer from him was, and I'm not saying this is his personality, it sounds like you know him fairly well, but under promise and over deliver. That's kind of been my mantra on things is not undersell yourself, but give a satisfactory to good but not great answer, and then wow them with the product.
So. Well, that was the risk with the Bronco. It was touted for so long and talked up for so long, and when it finally came out, the risk was, okay, you've been holding my breath for how long now, and it's here. Is it going to hold up? Is it going to be what you've been claiming it to be? So
yeah, that's a danger, to build the expectation game, and you want to tease it along and make sure that your loyal Ford customer is hanging in there with you.
Right.
But the danger is that it may come out and they're like, really?
That's what.
But I would tell you, I joined a Ford Bronco Sport group on Facebook. So I was kind of curious what was driving some thinking, holy crap, these people are really enthusiastic about Sport model.
Yeah.
And, they just started really showing up on the dealer lots here. So about a week ago, I popped over to the Ford dealer on a Sunday, and they're a little bit bigger than I thought they were going to be, because I knew that they were supposed to share the Escape platform, but they had one parked next to an Escape, and you would not think that they were on the same platform or even similar.
Which has me scratching my head again. I'm playing chess with all the different brands that are out there. My wife and I own the main competition to that vehicle in the Cherokee Trailhawk. And the last, I'm going to do air quotes here, redesign of the Cherokee was a facelift to get over what most people complained about from the moment Spy Shots started linking out there was the squinty-eyed look.
Yep.
But I'm waiting for a ground up. This is the Jeep's moneymaker. It's their volume vehicle.
Right.
I am waiting for the next gen ground up redesign of the Cherokee that isn't basically a Dart on steroids. And I can't wait to see how basically the Bronco Sport shakes up that compact off-roader segment, because I can tell you from experience, that's a very capable rig.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine that the Bronco Sport is everything that they've built it to be, because they've got the heritage and the pedigree to do so, and they've got stiff competition in that Cherokee Trailhawk. So
definitely.
Everybody, I scream at my computer every time someone compares it to a Compass or the Renegade. I'm like, no, it's the Cherokee.
Yeah.
Have you guys had a chance to drive? I know you guys get a chance to drive some of these vehicles. Have you driven the Bronco Sport?
No, not yet. Matt and I just need to go over to the Ford House. We have seen a couple here in town. I saw my first one a couple weeks ago, and I about drove off the road to chase him down.
Right.
My wife and I are playing it fairly safe. We've got some big trips coming up that we want to stay healthy for. So I've not got too adventurous when it comes to human contact out in the outside world.
Yeah, my dad and I, over the Christmas holiday, we were up in Oklahoma City where my folks live, and Dad and I jumped in the car and ran down to the Ford dealer just a couple miles from their place, and they had one out front. And he and I just kind of walked around it, and we were talking about it, and he was asking questions, and I was, doing what I could to fill him in. And we mentioned the fact that they're the same size or on the same platform as the Escape. And he said, really? Like, I remember the Escape being little bitty. And then we drove over to where the Escapes are, and now they're huge. So, I mean, I definitely see what you're saying with that Escape being a smaller vehicle, and the shared platform is kind of an interesting idea. But I think Ford's got something special with that Sport and with the Bronco coming. I just hope they haven't alienated too many people by waiting so long to bring out the Bronco.
And, a friend of the channel has got a deposit down on the full-size Bronco.
He does,
and right now the bad news coming out of Ford is the V6 models are lagging behind, and it's the fear when you start announcing stuff too soon and all the kinks haven't been worked out down the line that this sort of stuff starts to happen. And, you see it in other industries too. Apple, who notoriously never announces something until it's, quote unquote ready. There was their wireless charging pad called AirPower never saw the light of day. And I can only imagine heads rolled inside Apple for that. So I can only imagine, what internal conversations are happening at Ford with the full-size Bronco hitting some major roadblocks in its path to production. So. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. And, anytime you have a new product, then you're going to have constraints on materials because of providers, whatever. But real funny story and a quick one is the original Saturn Vue. He had a four-cylinder and a V6. The four-cylinder had a CVT transmission in the beginning. And it also had a manual transmission, which, like every other vehicle, was a low penetrating option. Well, we had a problem getting these CVT transmissions. I think they were being built in Poland or somewhere in Eastern Europe. So we had the choice of either shutting down that part of the plant, which was not a great idea, especially a new product, or overbuild with manual transmissions. And Saturn being Saturn, we got our retailers together, a retailer task force, and said, here's our situation. Can you guys sell a lot of manual transmission Vues? They said, if it's priced and packaged right, we think we can.
Yeah.
And so we built this thing, we call it the Sport package. Came with a stick, a sunroof, and alloy wheels.
Nice.
And it was like $15,300. This is back in 2002, 2003. 60% of the Vues sold that year were sticks, which was just crazy. The deal was so good, retailers were teaching customers how to drive a stick so that they would buy it because these customers wanted it because it's such a great deal.
That's
awesome.
A
great vehicle. And we've used that line before, that thinking for since then, if you position it right, you can sell it. Yeah. And it was a great, that was my boss who came up with that idea with the retailers, and it was brilliant, just brilliant.
That's fantastic. Fantastic.
I love that just from business mind.
Oh, yeah.
That is an excellent story. So, all right. We don't want to exhaust all your knowledge. We want to keep people coming back for more. And
that was it.
Keep the lines of communication open. So, as you are aware, as most of our listeners are aware, we normally close out our interviews with random misfire.
Yeah.
But we've already done that with you, Bill. So
yes, you have.
We're mixing things up a little bit. So for those who have not, and I don't know why you have not listened to episode 44, Vehicles Have Nannies Too, go and listen to our introduction with Bill. Just like this episode, wealth of knowledge. Looking forward to having you back for a third, fourth, fifth, sixth time. longtime friend of the channel. I look forward to saying
Yeah.
that
Oh, yeah.
for many, many years.
We are, yes.
So I think it was sometime October, November. I saw this circulating on Facebook, and I stole it and put it on Garage Talk's page as well, and it got a lot of traction. So I figured I would ask you a few questions from this kind of random car poll that was going around. I know the answer to some of these just from our conversations with you, both on air and off air. But it's a vehicle history quiz, basically.
Uh-oh.
So your first car.
My first car?
Yeah.
That I paid for, or
Yes.
that I...
Well, you answer how you see fit on that one.
First car I had money in was that 79 Z28 we talked about last time.
Yes. Last car you sold.
The last car I sold was a 76 GMC pickup.
Oh,
Ooh, why?
This was a year ago.
Yeah.
And, I buy these things, at least those fun vehicles, buy them and, use them for a year, put like 200 miles on it and sell it. This was a very nice one. It only had 31,000 miles on it. It was a 6-cylinder, 3 on the tree, nothing else. No power, anything. And I love that truck.
Yep.
But somebody came by with the right amount of money and I sold it.
I'm going to need you to call me up before you get rid of a deal like that again. Yeah, ouch. All right. Last car you purchased.
Last car I purchased is this, excuse me, I thought it was the Mini. A year ago, I bought a 2004 Honda CR-V for my winter vehicle.
nice.
If I had to put money on it, I was going to say Mini, so I would have lost out on that one. So,
Yeah.
favorite car, I'm guessing, was your Camaro.
Well, it was at the time, but I've got the benefit of like 40 years of
Yeah.
memories built up. It's probably a much better car in my head than it ever was in real life.
Yeah, given the year of it, yeah, I would probably say that.
I will tell you, I'm going to say one of my favorites is actually a company car I had in 2010, which was a Chevy Avalanche.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that was a really that vehicle did everything. It was comfortable like a Suburban because essentially it was, but you could fold down that mid gate and haul anything you wanted. It was so versatile. I loved that truck.
That's one that I never quite got the hate behind it. I understand it was controversially styled
Right.
in the first gen.
Right.
Yeah.
But the second gen, it was essentially a Tahoe or a Suburban because it was the length of a Suburban without the rear window. So
Right.
there should have been zero reason why it did not see a third generation, and I would love to have seen a third generation. I was actually contemplating buying one when I bought my Silverado because
It was the best of both. It truly was the best of both worlds. So, and I know Matt will probably fall out of his chair when I say this, but it kind of makes me want to get a Honda Ridgeline.
Oh my goodness. Oh.
hit the stop button, Matt. We're done with this episode.
I think I threw up a little in my mouth. Oh my.
Yeah.
I think I've listened to you guys enough to know Matt doesn't care for that.
I think there's mutual disrespect for that vehicle on this channel.
Yeah.
Wow.
I had a girlfriend, an ex-girlfriend, whose mom drove an Avalanche. It was white, and I would imagine that if you were to ask that ex-girlfriend which I liked more, her or the truck, she'd have to think about it before she answered because I really, really liked that truck. That was a really cool truck.
I understand for like hauling stuff in the bed, it had limited bed capacity and payload.
Right.
But it was a Swiss Army knife in all the right ways, and it was a legit truck.
Right.
Well,
and that's if you bought one to use as a work truck, it was not what that was intended for. It was meant to be a people mover that also had a pickup bed. So
it's to that point though, Cory, when you folded down the back seat and that they call it a mid gate came down, you could put 8-foot lumber through there.
Yep.
And when I hauled, I built a hunting blind up northern Michigan, that is, and went to Lowe's to get all my wood and everything else. And it was a lot of wood, but because of that hard tonneau cover in the back and with the seat folded, you would not have known I was carrying all this wood in this truck because everything was undercover, which was really great. But oh yeah, it was so versatile.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I can't tell you how incredibly close I was to purchasing one. The problem was speccing it the way I wanted it. It was going to be a few grand more than the Silverado I ended up with. And at the time I was going into, I caught flack on Patreon for admitting this a couple of weeks ago, but I was in swimming pool maintenance and care, and that was my work truck, was my Silverado. And yes, okay, Andy, yes, I was a pool boy. There, I said it. So, and no, and it made me a lot of money, but on the purchasing side of things, I went more luxury on the inside because, again, where I'm spending most of my time, the East Texas area I covered, I was driving a lot in it, and I frequently saw over 20 mpg in that thing. So it frustrates me the amount of technology that we've put under the hood for what. Yeah. But that's another issue for another day.
You're going to get me going down a rabbit hole that, we could spend a whole episode on that one. So
Oh, man. R.I.P. Avalanche. That's all I can say there.
Yeah.
That and equally right behind it, the 2003 Pontiac Aztek.
I've got a special place.
Matt is holding on for life. I can just see him.
I have a special place in my heart for that vehicle. And I almost brought it up earlier when you were talking about when Bob Lutz came to GM and engineers had their checklist of, panel gaps and this and that and the other. And the Aztek is a notorious success by all the internal GM standards at the time because it did everything it was supposed to do. It just wasn't customer focused.
Designed by engineers. It's not designed by any kind of artist because there's no beauty to that vehicle at all.
Well, two things. One, it had a ton of utility on the interior. It was cool.
It did.
I leased one for my wife because I had to. The condition of having a company car was I had to get her a new vehicle every 2 years, so leasing was the way to go. And what saved that vehicle was a very strong lease program. Truthfully, but Bob Lutz referred to it as an angry toaster. He called it. So, but it was. We loved it with young kids. It had so much utility, but you're right, man. It was not attractive. It was uniquely styled though. So, you did not lose that in a mall parking lot.
Yeah. No, you didn't. That's if you want to twist it to a good light. Yeah. A positive light there. Yeah. Okay. All right.
I think I've shared on the channel before. I had a good friend in high school who had one, and she was different. She wanted a different car, and that hit all the right box. And she's no longer with us, and so I have very fond memories of that car. And we sat in the back and tailgated on and with it, and we joked about getting the tent canopy that went on the back. And
absolutely.
So there is a special place in my heart for the Pontiac Aztek. No, it was not pretty, but yes, it was different. And Lindsay, love you to death. Miss you, girl. And special place. I'll just leave it at that before I get teary-eyed.
Okay, that's good. We won't talk about that anymore.
So we will end on kind of a similar note. Okay. How to phrase this one, because I'm veering from my list now.
Okay.
The one vehicle that has been killed in the history of vehicles that you wish could be resurrected?
This is similar to a couple of those questions you asked me last time. And, I when it comes to vehicles, I tend to live in the moment, so you can say, what would be your dream vehicle coming up? Well, it depends. Next week, it could be different than what next month might be.
Right. I'm very similar.
Yeah. Favorite vehicle? I would tell you that I really like the Saturn Sky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we talked about that one last time because it was really a well-engineered car that was a low-volume car. It was never meant to be a high-volume car that we pulled off, that we could, we got, it got approved and built and sold. And because of that, it was so antithetical to the way General Motors thought. And it was pulled off and it was sold and it was done right. That had kind of a special place in my heart because it was one of those, let's take a risk.
Yeah.
And it paid off. And so it kind of stuck in there more than any other car in my recent past.
I would still kill for a Redline version of that. Supercharged, rear-wheel drive with a stick and manual operated top. Like, it checks all the right boxes.
Yeah.
And it's just one of the...
And Pontiac Solstice or Saturn Sky, either one, first thing I would do is LS swap it.
Oh.
Well, I know that you know this, that there is a company that does that.
Yes. Yes.
So, I've seen them, and it's got to be incredible. Even the base 4-cylinder was no slouch in that car. It was not heavy. And, candidly, it was, because I drove the Redline as well, and I didn't see an appreciable difference.
Right.
I know it was there, but the way I drive, because I'm not on the Hammer, but not much. So I didn't really notice the key difference, but they were great vehicles. And to me, I look at the structural rigidity of a vehicle more than I do engine performance. I like it to be smooth. I like it to be vibration free, and I want the car to be tight.
Yeah.
I hate rattles, and rattles come from a poorly built vehicle, and I hate that. So this car was tight, and I loved it.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So all what could have been with the corporate restructure. So, Bill, we cannot thank you enough for just another fun night of conversation and more insight into brands that I love, brands that I miss, and some real, I've done some financial tightening of the belt in my past, and sometimes tough decisions have to be made. Unfortunately, for big companies like General Motors, the public pays the price and can be critical of you many, many years down the road, like we are doing tonight and last week with last week's episode. But you are a wealth of knowledge, a true blessed to talk to, and we just thank you for coming on.
And absolutely welcome anytime.
Yes.
Absolutely anytime.
Yes.
By all means, reach out to us and jump on, because it's always fun having you on.
So I know.
How's next week? I'm just kidding.
So I know we plugged your website once mid-episode, but one more time, where can people find you and what are you working on?
Yeah, VehicleNanny.com is where I drive all my traffic, because that's where I'm going to share my articles, my stories. I'm doing something weekly now with, you guys know Cars and Bids is that new enthusiast auction site, which I really enjoy. I think Doug DeMuro does a neat job with.
He does.
And how he structured that. So I'm going to pick one vehicle every Thursday that's currently up for auction as my favorite pick. And it's not going to be, this 911 is going to be sweet. It's going to be some oddball that I think people should take a look at.
Awesome.
I like that.
I'm featuring it every Thursday. That's the fun side of it. So I think you'll look for that every Thursday. But other than that, I'm going to continue my support of young car enthusiasts. Since we last talked, I got connected with Northwood University, which is got a huge automotive program here in Michigan. And they do an auto camp in the summer for 12 to 18-year-olds, trying to get them thinking about automotive as a career. So they've reached out to me for my input as an advisor for this camp. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. So it's all about, trying to keep the car hobby alive, keep our young car enthusiasts enthused, show them they can have fun with an inexpensive vehicle. That's the key.
Absolutely.
And we truly appreciate the work that you're doing to keep not only us in business by stoking the flames of the next generation, but just, instilling that passion in others. So thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, gentlemen. And until we meet again, let's look for that opportunity, because I really enjoy talking with you guys. I love your banter, the yin to your yang, and I think that you really have something special here, and just keep at it.
So just another great episode, and
Absolutely.
I don't know.
I'm laughing at you. I'm not laughing at Bill. Bill, I'm not laughing at you. I promise.
We should have set a timer from the moment we said hello, good evening to him until the moment we finally talked ourselves into saying, all right, we've got more to do on either side. We could talk to him forever.
Oh,
could we not?
Yep.
Like, there's just so much knowledge in his time with General Motors and his connections to all the brands out there.
And he's got a lot of fun stuff going on, too. I mean,
really
his new segment he's got coming up on Thursdays, super stoked.
Yep.
That's going to be a fun one to pay attention
So
to.
we've plugged it several times in this episode, but please go check him out, vehiclenanny.com. And while you're online, go check us out, gtgaragetalk.com. You'll find links to our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all of that from there. You can even shoot us an email, tell us what you like, what you didn't like on each and every episode. We've had some fun conversations with some of our Patreons here lately, so we just truly appreciate any and all feedback we can get from you, our listening audience. We thank you so much. Keep listening, keep subscribing, and until next time.
Can we do, before you sign off, I know, I'm throwing the brakes on. Can we do a question of the week this week?
Yeah, please.
Okay. If you were to bring back a General Motors vehicle that has been killed off, what would it be? There's your question of the week.
Go find us on the social media and answer that question.
That's it.
And until next time, bye.